Welcome to Adventures in Life. I'm your host, Earl Beecher. Our guest is Willie Wilkerson, and when I told the staff here at the station that he was an expert on Las Vegas, they said, "Oh boy!" And I said, "Yes, he's an expert on Las Vegas history, not on gambling techniques." Oh. And so, anyway, Willie, welcome to the show. I want to introduce you to our audience as an author, as well as an expert on Las Vegas. And I would like to show this book, The Man Who Invented Las Vegas. Who is the man that invented Las Vegas?
Well, the man who invented modern Las Vegas was my father, Billy Wilkerson.
Your father.
That's right.
And that's who this book is about,
That's
and
correct.
that's whose picture's on the cover.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, what do you mean he invented?
Well, Las Vegas already existed, but what he did was he was the first to start modern Las Vegas as we know it now by building the Flamingo Hotel there. That was the first.
That was the first hotel.
That was the first
Flamingo.
modern hotel, yes.
Now, was it the first casino?
No, it wasn't the first casino. It was just the first modern hotel like we see modern hotels today.
Well, now, Las Vegas is famous for both, but I think it's more famous for casinos than it is for hotels.
Well, it was the first modern resort complex. See, up
Okay.
until that time, the hotels that existed were more motels rather than hotels.
As a child, I used to travel between Salt Lake City and Los Angeles and stop at Las Vegas, and it was just another little stop in the road.
Exactly.
You can't say that today.
No,
I mean,
no.
It's changed so much. But
Exactly.
Tell us, why was, now you say he started the Flamingo.
That's correct.
Was he the owner? What?
Well, he was the owner. He bought the land, and he started to build the hotel, and he gambled his construction money away. So he got halfway through the hotel and had to stop. And at that point, he got funding from a man who was the front man for the mafia, and who gave him the money to finish off the hotel. He didn't realize that he was in bed with organized crime, but that's where the story begins.
So the story really begins when organized crime came and joined with your father,
Exactly.
who was trying. But did he intend to have gambling in the hotel
Oh, absolutely.
before organized crime
Yes.
descended?
Yes,
on it?
absolutely. That's what brought him to Vegas, is gambling.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, tell us a little bit about it. I mean, the book has some interesting things in the content here. It starts with the man.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about the man.
Well, the man was my father, and he was born in Tennessee in 1890. And he ran speakeasies during Prohibition in New York, owned them.
Now, was there gambling going on there, or they just called that because of the drinking?
I don't know for certain, but for sure he owned establishments that sold illegal alcohol.
And he owned them?
And he owned them, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that was back east?
That was in New York.
In New York.
Mm-hmm.
And then what brought him to Vegas? That's a big
Well,
jump,
well,
especially when Vegas didn't have anything.
Well, from speakeasies in New York, he got involved with the film industry, and then from the film industry in New York, which was at that time centered in New York, the film industry started to come to the West Coast to take advantage of the weather. And
are we talking about the late 20s?
Very late 20s.
Very
yes.
late 20s,
Yes.
okay.
And he got the idea of starting a film trade paper here, which he started, which was the Hollywood Reporter, which was the first of its kind.
The Hollywood Reporter?
Yes.
Well, that's quite a prestigious paper.
Yes, yes.
And he started that?
And he started that, that's correct. And then from there, he began to branch out. He started restaurants like Cafe Trocadero, Ciro's, LaRue.
You're mentioning some of the most famous.
Absolutely.
Ciro's, I think, is a big name.
Yes, very big name, yeah.
And he started that?
He started that, too. Mm-hmm. But through all of this, he had a terrible gambling addiction like my grandfather did. My grandfather owned a third of Coca-Cola and gambled it all away.
A third of coca.
Yes.
Yeah, if I were you, I'd have a conversation with grandfather when I see him next.
But so he, it was finally getting the better of him by 1945, and he needed he needed some help. And at that time, organizations like Gamblers Anonymous just didn't exist. So the way the afflicted fended for themselves was to build a casino. The theory being that if you lost, the money was cleverly recycled.
It was still yours.
It was still yours, that's correct. Yeah.
And so when was the Flamingo built?
It was finished in 1947.
In 47?
Yeah.
Okay. And it had the gambling casino, well, it was the first and most prestigious of the hotels for quite a while.
Oh, exactly, yes, yes.
Then what?
Well, once he got the money to finish off the hotel, then a month after the contract was signed, three men showed up at the construction site, and they were Gus Greenbaum, Mo Sedway, and Bugsy Siegel. And they introduced themselves.
I don't know the other names, but I've heard
they're
the name Bugsy.
big names in organized crime, yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And so they introduced themselves to my father as his new partners. And then that's when things began to get difficult.
I would imagine. You know, I've often heard this story about the camel who put his nose in the tent, and the next thing you know, he's moved into the tent, and you're out.
Yeah.
And I've heard that has been applied to some of the activities of the mafia. If you decide to welcome them in a little bit, pretty soon they're in there.
Well, you don't remain a partner for long, that's for sure.
And this is what happened to your father.
That's correct. He, to cut a long story very short, there was a stockholders meeting called by Ben Siegel and some of the other partners and their attorneys, and in an unfinished room at the Flamingo, Siegel said, "You're going to turn over all of your stock to me. You're not going to get any paid. You're not going to be paid for it, and just be lucky that you get out with your life." And when my father refused to do that, Siegel stood up and he says, "Listen, I'm just going to lay it out to you very clearly. If you don't give it to me, I will kill you." So my father went into hiding in Paris.
Paris, France?
Yeah, Paris, France, because he knew that any place in the United States was not safe for him to be, while Siegel, made this.
In other words, he did not turn over his holdings?
No, he didn't, because they were legally his. And Siegel was a very avaricious man. He wanted control over the entire operation. So he was going to get my father's participation, even if he had to kill him for it.
Okay, so what happened?
Well, my father hid out in Paris for over 6 months, and during that time, probably within the 4th month, he realized that no business deal was worth risking his life for, or being in exile for the rest of his life. And through his attorneys in Beverly Hills, he negotiated a fee of settlement with Siegel, and that was agreed upon. But he also, while my father was still in Paris, he was issued a warning to stay in Paris until Siegel was killed, because it wouldn't be safe for him to return to the United States while Siegel was still alive. So 2 days after Siegel was murdered, my father flew back to Los Angeles.
Did they know who killed Siegel? Did your father have any clue who he was going to be partners with?
Well, no, because this front man, a man by the name of G. Harry Rothberg, was checked out to be a legitimate businessman from Chicago. And he had all the credentials and all the right stuff, and my father decided to go ahead with the deal. It wasn't until after that deal was signed that my father realized, when these 3 men arrived at the construction site, that he made a deal with the devil. And so he only had 2 options at that point, was for him to get out of the deal altogether, of which meant forfeiting.
Get out alive.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Or staying and not losing his participation, you see.
They tell me it's time to pause for a public service announcement, so stay with us. We'll be right back with Willie Wilkerson. Our guest is Willie Wilkerson, the son of the man who invented modern Las Vegas. And you were telling us how he got edged out of the Flamingo Hotel.
That's correct.
Did he continue working with Vegas, or was that his sole adventure there?
Well, after that, he ventured back one last time to Las Vegas to start the restaurant LaRue there in 1950.
The restaurant LaRue. I'm
Yes.
not familiar with that.
Well, it was a very, very swanky dinner nightclub.
Upscale.
Yeah, very like his other Hollywood ventures.
Yes.
And
Did he still own Ciro's and these other things
yes,
at
he
this
did.
time?
Yes. he
Okay.
did, yeah. And but he went in underfunded. He didn't have enough capital to keep it going, so he sold it. And that became the footprint for the Sands Hotel, which is now gone. But,
Yes.
but that became...
It was on that site?
It was on that site. It became the main
Okay,
dining
we all
room.
know where that was located.
Yeah, sure.
Well, he certainly had a tie-in with the entertainment industry, which I think is one of the major attractions to go to Vegas. A lot of people go there for the shows.
Yes, that's true.
And so he was into that, and he could bring in the entertainers.
That's correct. That's correct. He had access
Okay.
to all of that.
Okay, so he did the restaurant LaRue, and then what?
Well, after that, there was a project before that, right after the Flamingo. He put all of his money into a restaurant in Beverly Hills called Leglon, which was very, very successful. And then Restaurant LaRue in Las Vegas came after Leglon.
I see.
Yeah.
Now, you used the phrase, he invented modern Las Vegas here. Is that because of the entertainment angle? What is it that he brought to Vegas that makes him worthy of the title of the man who invented it?
Well, what I meant by that title is that he was the first to visualize Las Vegas on an absolute grand scale. He wanted to build a Disneyland for gamblers, of which had never been conceived of up until that point.
Well, he succeeded.
Yes, he was the first to buy 33 acres of land, which was tremendous at that time. Of course, now it's a postage stamp. But he wanted a complex that was, I mean, he was the first to have a golf course. He had a shooting range. He had horses. He had these fine these exquisite stores which you see in all the hotels now, like Gucci and Hermes and those kinds of brand names.
Really, it was out in the middle of nowhere in the 40s.
And he knew he had to build something that colossal to lure his Hollywood Beverly Hills clients to Las Vegas and make them stay there. Because we have to remember that air conditioning, didn't exist.
Vegas was not too comfortable,
No,
as
it
I
wasn't.
remember.
No, it wasn't. So
he was really hot.
So he was the first. He was the first in the country to have an air-conditioned hotel.
I see.
And he knew that his clients would not be flying up; they would be driving up. So after that long drive, it had to be a place that was so inviting and alluring that they would have no thoughts about leaving. So that's what he wanted to create.
You know, Vegas is still using the same philosophy because they're accenting the family activities now to try and get families there. And more so, I think, than ever before. Was this part of his vision?
No, he wanted a retreat specifically for gamblers. He was a chronic gambler like himself, and he knew there were scores like himself in Hollywood. We have to remember that that Hollywood was wide open for gambling and prostitution up until 1938. It was like the Las Vegas of its time. And when that crackdown came in 1938, all of the people who enjoyed those pursuits had no place to go except to Las Vegas. So there were scores of people like himself who enjoyed those pursuits and wanted to do it in a comfortable environment and use it as an escape. So taking families wasn't a consideration at that point.
In fact, it was the opposite.
It was the opposite. That's correct.
Definitely the opposite.
Yeah.
Okay. And now, after his adventures there and LaRue, he closed that or sold it?
Yes, he closed all of them. That's
Then
correct.
what did he do?
Well, when my sister and I were born in 1951 and 1952, he just concentrated on the reporter. He had had enough
The
of
Hollywood Reporter.
That's right. Yeah.
And so he ran the paper.
That's correct. He'd had enough of nightclubs and restaurants. And
Oh, did he sell cereals? And
yes, he sold all of them.
All of them?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he spent time. Now, the Reporter, I think, has a reputation for being almost the official newspaper. It's supposed to be more factual and less flamboyant than some of the other papers that we hear of today.
It was called the Industry Bible when my father was alive.
Yes.
Yeah.
When did your father pass away?
1962.
In 62,
Yeah.
so it's been a while.
Yeah.
You were not too old.
No.
You were 11 when that happened.
That's correct.
Okay, our story then from 50 to 62 just deals with reporting what's going on in Hollywood and who's making what deals and what
That's
pictures
correct.
are coming and things of that nature. Why did you choose to concentrate on the Las Vegas elements of your father's life for your book instead of the Hollywood things? Because I should think the Hollywood, well, it has so much glamour, where I think talking about the mafia is sort of fascinating but not glamorous.
Well, when the film Bugsy came out in 1990,
This was the one that used children to portray all the parts, wasn't it?
no, well, that was a different film. But
A different one than the one I'm thinking of.
Yeah, this was the
All
one
right.
with Warren Beatty.
Okay.
Who was the story about the gangster. And while it was a brilliantly made film, it was historically incorrect. And when I went to see it at the movie theater, I realized that my father was not even mentioned in the film. And so at that point, I decided to write a biography about my father, which I started to do. My problem as a biographer is that my father had his hand in so many pies that to write a definitive biography, I mean, could take me 15 years and 900 pages. And so I needed to get a story out quick to heal the damage done by the movie historically.
How was their damage done?
Well, the fact that my father wasn't mentioned, the fact that Bugsy Siegel got all the credit, which is not true.
He entered after it was all designed and under construction.
Yeah, exactly.
I see.
And the film made it sound like it was completely Bugsy Siegel's idea, of which it was not. And when you have a powerful motion picture, it tends to educate the public. I don't care what anybody says. I mean, it's...
Whether it's correct or not, that's
Sure.
what the accepted idea
Exactly. I mean, an
becomes.
Oliver Stone JFK is a very powerful film.
Yes,
You see.
okay, in comparison.
Exactly.
Tell me, I've wondered, why was Bugsy murdered? I mean, he was the front man for the mafia there, managing it for them. Was it his own people that killed him?
Well, there are three theories, and I mentioned this in the book. The first theory is that it was a simple individual, somebody he pissed off. It was a book deal gone bad, and this individual just decided to kill him. The second theory is that the group of legitimate hotel owners, which included my father, got together, and in order to send a message to the Eastern Syndicate that they did not want organized crime in Las Vegas, they hired a hitman on their own to kill Bugsy Siegel as a message that they did not want that infiltration. But the third theory is that his own partners killed him because he just spent too much money. You see, a film that was, a hotel that was originally budgeted at $1 million, Siegel spent close to $6.5 million of his partner's money.
Which today, is,
Yeah.
I mean, the new ones they're putting in today, I hear billions
Yes,
mentioned.
the Venetian was $2 billion. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, I wonder how they expect to break even when they put that kind of money in it. And yet, when you check on with the Las Vegas Travel Bureau or something, they have something like 98% occupancy.
Oh, yes.
It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's incredible.
The growth that's going on. I see the same kind of growth surrounding Disneyland. Anaheim, that whole area is Where's it all coming from, you know?
Yes.
I wonder, but it seems to be there.
Yeah, well, he definitely had a knack for entertaining people or cleverly identifying what people wanted.
Bugsy did.
No, my father did.
Your father did?
Yes.
Well, I would think your father, being the owner of the Hollywood Reporter, would know exactly what people wanted, because he knew all the latest deals and who were the hottest stars, and he would know who to get to appear. How did the Mafia get a star to appear in their hotel? Scare them to it?
Well, probably, but certainly one of the reasons why the Mafia was so eager to get involved with my father is that he did have these connections of which they didn't. So that was an invaluable source for them.
Well, we need to pause for another public service announcement. Stay with us. We'll be right back with Willie Wilkerson. Our guest is Willie Wilkerson III. And your father was into so many interesting things, and yet he passed away when you were about 11. What's your favorite story about your father?
My father discovered a lot of Hollywood talent, but the story that I absolutely love is his discovery of Lana Turner. And it was a day in 1936 in January, and there was a little luncheonette right on the corner of Hollywood and Highland that my father used to go down and take a break from the office and have a Coke.
Oh, I've been to that drugstore.
Yes.
That's the story.
Yes.
Anyway. Yes.
And it was one day while he was there, it was a high school hangout for girls from Hollywood High. So he used to go there and just get away from the office and sip his Coke and just air his mind out. And one day, the most ravishing 15-year-old was sitting across this moon-shaped counter, and he wanted to meet her. And so he got the proprietor of the luncheonette to effect an introduction. And he walked up to Judy Turner and said,
Lana.
Yes, but she was known as Judy.
She was?
Yes, her real name was Judy Turner.
I didn't know that.
Yes, no, the studios concocted a name for her. So, and the sweater girl and all that. But he walked up to her and said, here's my card, how would you like to be in pictures? And she said, well, I don't know, I didn't have to ask my mother. And he said, well, why don't you think about it and get back to me? Well, the next day, Mildred Turner, her mother, and Judy herself came to my father's office. My father wrote a letter to Agent Zeppo Marx, who was one of the Marx brothers.
Yes.
And shipped her off. She was signed and made her first picture with Mervyn LeRoy, and the rest is history.
Yes, she was one of the glamorous ones.
Oh, incredible, incredible. Until the day she died, she was always, she told me in an interview that she was just extremely grateful for that opportunity.
Well, that is a fascinating... I'm trying to think of the name of the drugstore. It was Shafts or something.
No, it was called the Top Hat Cafe.
The Top Hat Cafe.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, later on, Schwab's.
Schwab's.
Yes, but that's not true. Yeah.
That's not true?
That's not true at all, no.
It was a cafe.
Yes, right across the street. Schwab's is about 2.5 miles down on Sunset. She would have been had to be a hell of a sprinter to cut a class, sip a Coke, and then dash all the way back. That's
interesting to get the story straight, because I'd always had this other impression.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
listen, I want to thank you for being our guest on Adventures in Life. You have, I'm sure you have a lot more interesting stories that you can tell us.
We're only getting started.
Yeah, so thank you for being here.
Thank you so much,
It's a pleasure, Willie. And we want to thank our viewing audience for joining us, and please join us again for more Adventures in Life.